The jobs number, of course, coming in better than expected as employers added 103,000 jobs in September, but the unemployment rate stayed the same, 9.1. Want to get some reaction from the White House this morning. First on Squawk on the Street is Gene Sperling. Gino, to some of us, Director of the National Economic Council and Assistant for the President for Economic Policy. Gene, good to see you this morning.
Well, thanks for having us.
If you count this as a glass half full number, just how full is the glass?
I'm sorry, I couldn't understand your question. Could you try again?
Sure. If this number is a glass half full number, how full is that glass?
Look, I'd put it this way. It's always a comfort if job growth is greater than projected, but not that much. It's not nearly good enough for our economy. It's not nearly good enough for this president. We need to have very robust growth and job growth to get this unemployment rate down, to help us dig ourselves out of the worst financial recession since the Great Depression. And that's why what's most important is, are we willing to do something significant, pass the American Jobs Act, so that we not only take out needed insurance against a possible stalling of the economy or even a double-dip recession, but we give the needed demand so that we can be creating significant job growth next year and start to see the unemployment rate go down. And what you saw today in the New York Times was that the top forecasters who are projecting that the president's plan could create from 1.3 to 1.9 million jobs next year are suggesting that the Republican alternative is non-existent, that it would not even score as creating any jobs. We just cannot afford to take that kind of risk. That's why we have to have the American Jobs Act. We have to have something that will help this recovery take hold over the next 12 or 18 months. It would be inexcusable and irresponsible for us not to.
Gene, big shift by the president, I think, in terms of trying to get compromise. The millionaires tax. No longer talking about 250,000. No longer talking about 400,000. How can the Republicans reject trying to make it so people who make millions pay more taxes?
Well, I think the number one thing is, how can they reject, or how can they sit on their hands when the top forecasters are projecting, 1.5%, 2% growth for next year, 9% unemployment and rising, and say it's okay to do nothing? It's okay to just take even a substantial risk of a downturn? How is that even possible? And of course, if we were to do something significant to help this recovery take hold, everyone would benefit. Even those who would be asked to contribute a bit more, those making over $1 million, they, as well as average workers, teachers, construction workers, benefit from a stronger economy. So the real question is, how can they say no to helping to end this run of teacher layoffs at this time? How can they say no to trying to do something about getting construction workers back to work, rebuilding our schools? These are things the American public, even most Republicans, support.
But Gene, in your forecast and in your estimations, there is no impact on job creation whatsoever if you put this surtax on so-called millionaires?
That is absolutely...
There's no knock-on impact? They won't hire a maid or a dog walker or a nanny or whatnot? There's no impact?
A couple of points. Number one, this surtax does not even start till 2013. So there's not a penny of tax increase on anybody over this year or next year. Second, 99.7% of Americans would be untouched by this. And third, yes, these are people who would benefit so much more from a stronger economy than they will be mildly affected by a surtax that helps this recovery take hold.
David?
You know, the president spent the last 10 minutes of his press conference yesterday talking about Europe and the potential impact of a financial crisis there on our own economy. How confident are you that steps are truly being taken in Europe right now to deal with the consequences of what many people believe will be a Greek default?
Well, obviously, the president talks often with the leaders in Europe, with the Chancellor Merkel and others, and Secretary Geithner obviously works very closely with the relevant finance ministers in Europe. But I think the president's main point is that there are some things we cannot control and some things we have only partial control of. What we do have control of is what we do in the United States. We saw that the debacle over the debt limit contributed to the loss of confidence. It didn't need to. We could have had a bipartisan agreement. And right now, what is under our control is to show the global economy and, most important, our own workers that we can do something to help this recovery take hold. That will provide a buffer against significant numbers of the risks, either from Europe or elsewhere, in making sure that the United States economy and the global economy continues to expand.
Hey, Gene, on the jobs number this morning, are there some indications that the break-even number is coming down? In other words, the number of jobs we need to create to make up for new entrants?
You know, that's an interesting question. I don't think there's any question that most economists believe that over the last decade or so, that break-even number has come down some. But here's the other side. We're digging out of the worst recession since the Great Depression. We have a deep hole. So it's not good enough just to break even. And that's the point the president's making. Those who don't want to put forward or support the American Jobs Act are implicitly saying that they think breaking even is okay, that 9.1% unemployment and continued long-term unemployment is okay, that it's all right to just take a risk of that. The president feels that is inexcusable and irresponsible, that saying no is and doing nothing is just not an option. You know, some of the forecasters predicted that if we pass the American Jobs Act, the estimate for job growth next year will rise from 42,000 to 200,000 a month. That's 158,000 difference. You and I both know that can be the difference between an economy stalling out and a recovery that starts to get momentum and starts to see the unemployment rate come down.
And Gene, even a year or two after Christy Romer once promised 8% because of stimulus, the White House is not shying away from making projections or promises like that?
You know, you didn't hear me make any promises or projections. What I'm talking about is exactly what independent forecasters are suggesting. We believe enough in our plan that we're willing to let those who are independent experts speak and evaluate. And what have they said? They've said, people like macroeconomic advisors have said this plan would create 1.3 million jobs next year. Moody's, 1.9 million. These same experts have said that they couldn't even make a judgment of the Republican alternative because it would not have any job impact over the next 18 months. That's basically saying that doing nothing is an okay response. The president completely disagrees.
Gene, good to see you this morning. Looks like a gorgeous day down there in Washington. We'll see you next time.
It is a nice day. Thank you.
In many ways for you, Gene Sperling at the White House.